It was, to continue the novelistic structure, a long, joyful, delicious dinner, and although the talk consisted mainly of family quips and bright banalities, that reunion was to remain suspended in one's memory as a strangely significant, not wholly pleasant experience. One treasured it in the same way as when falling in love with a picture in a pinacoteca or remembering a dream style, the dream detail, the meaningful richness of color and contour in an otherwise meaningless vision. It should be observed that nobody, not even the reader, not even Botellin, who crumbled, alas, a precious cork, was at his or her best at that particular party. A faint element of farce and falsity flawed it, preventing an angel, if angels could visit artists, from being completely at ease, and yet it was a marvelous show which no artist would have wanted to miss. What a beautiful Nabokovian / Gogolian paragraph that was. Absolutely beautiful while claiming to be commonplace. The tablecloth and the candle blaze attracted timorous or impetuous moths, among which ardor, with a ghost pointing them out to her. Could not help recognizing many old flutter friends, pale intruders anxious only to spread out their delicate wings on some lustrous surface, ceiling bumpers in Goldman furs, thick-set rake hells with bushy antennae, and party-crashing hawk moths with red black-belted bellies, sailed or shot, silent or humming, into the dining room out of the black, hot, humid night. It was a black, hot, humid night in mid-July, 1888, at Artis in Ladore County, let us not forget. Let us never forget, with a family of 4 seated around an oval dinner table, bright with flowers and crystal, not a scene in a play, as might have seemed, nay, must have seemed, to a spectator with a camera or program. Placed in the velvet pit of the garden, 16 years had elapsed from the end of Marina's 3-year affair with Demon, intermissions of various length, a break of 2 months in the spring of 1870, another of almost 4 in the middle of 1871, had at the time only increased the tenderness and the torture. Her singularly coarsened features, her attire, that sequin-spangled dress, the glittering net over her strawberry blonde-dyed hair, her red sunburnt chest, and melodramatic makeup with too much ochre and maroon in it, did not even vaguely remind the man who had loved her more keenly than any other woman in his philanderings of the dash, the glamour, the lyricism of Marina Dermanov's beauty. It aggrieved him, the complete collapse of the past, the dispersal of its itinerant court and music makers, the logical impossibility to relate the dubious reality of the present to the unquestionable one of remembrance. Even these hors d'oeuvres on the Zakusochny stole of Artist Manor and its painted dining room did not link up with their petite soupers, although God knows the triple staple to start with was always much the same: pickled young bullets in their tight-fitting glossy fawn helmets, the gray beads of fresh caviar, the goose liver paste, peak aced with Perigord truffles. Demon popped into his mouth a last morsel of black bread with elastic samlet, gulped down a last pony of vodka, and took his place at the table with Marina facing him across its oblong length. Beyond the great bronze bowl with carved-looking Calville apples and elongated Pursty grapes, the alcohol his vigorous system had already imbibed was instrumental, as usual, in reopening what he gallicistically called condemned doors. And now, as he gaped involuntarily, as all men do while spreading a napkin, he considered Marina's pretentious Ciel Etoile hairdress and tried to realize, in the rare full sense of the word, tried to possess the reality of a fact by forcing it into the sensuous center. That here was a woman whom he had intolerably loved, who had loved him hysterically and skittishly, who insisted they make love on rugs and cushions laid on the floor, as respectable people do in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, who would whoosh down fluffy slopes on a bobsleigh a fortnight after a parturition, or arrive by the Orient Express with 5 trunks, Dak's grandsire, and a maid, to Dr. Stella Ospinko's hospitale, where he was recovering from a scratch received in a sword duel, and still visible as a white wheal under his 8th rib after a lapse of nearly 17 years. How strange that when one met after a long separation a chum or fat aunt whom one had been fond of as child, the unimpaired human warmth of the friendship was rediscovered at once, but with an old mistress this never happened. The human part of one's affection seemed to be swept away with the dust of the inhuman passion. In a wholesale operation of demolishment, he looked at her and acknowledged the perfection of the pottage. But she, this rather thick-set woman, good-hearted no doubt, but restive and sour-faced, glazed over, nose, forehead and all, with a sort of brownish oil that she considered to be more juvenizing than powder, was more of a stranger to him than Boutelin, who had once carried her in his arms in a feigned faint out of a Lador villa and into a cab after a quite final row on the eve of her wedding. I'm going to read that again. How strange that when one met after a long separation, a chum or fat aunt whom one had been fond of as a child, the unimpaired human warmth of the friendship was rediscovered at once, but with an old mistress this never happened. The human part of one's affection seemed to be swept away with the dust of the inhuman passion in a wholesale operation of demolishment. He looked at her and acknowledged the perfection of the potage, but she, this rather thick-set woman, good-hearted no doubt, but restive and sour-faced, glazed over, nose, forehead, and all, with a sort of brownish oil that she considered to be more juvenizing than powder, was more of a stranger to him than Boutelin, who had once carried her in his arms in a feigned faint out of a Lador villa and into a cab after a quite final row on the eve of her wedding. Marina, essentially a dummy in human disguise, experienced no such qualms, lacking as she did that third sight, individual, magically detailed imagination, which many otherwise ordinary and conformant people may also possess, but without which memory, even that of a profound thinker or technician of genius, is, let us face it, a stereotype or a tear sheet. We do not wish to be too hard on Marina. After all, her blood throbs in our wrists and temples, and many of our megrims are hers, not his. Yet we cannot condone the grossness of her soul. The man sitting at the head of the table and joined to her by a pair of cheerful youngsters, the juvenile in movie parlance on her right, the ingenue on her left, differed in no way from the same demon in much the same black jacket, minus perhaps the carnation he had evidently purloined from a vase Blanche had been told to bring from the gallery, who sat next to her at the Praslins last Christmas. The dizzy chasm he felt every time he met her, that awful wonder of life with its extravagant jumble of geological faults, could not be bridged by what she accepted as a dotted line of humdrum encounters. Poor old demon! All her pillow mates, being retired with that title, appeared before her like a harmless ghost, in the foyers of theaters, between mirror and fan, or in the drawing rooms of common friends, or once in Lincoln Park, indicating an indigo buttocked ape with his cane and not saluting her, according to the rules of the beau monde, because he was with a courtesan, somewhere further back, much further back. Safely transformed by her screen-corrupted mind into a stale melodrama was her 3-long period of hectically spaced love meetings with the demon, a torrid affair. The title of her only cinema hit, The Passion in Palaces, The Palms and Larches, his utter devotion, his impossible temper, separations, reconciliations, blue trains, tears, treachery, terror, and insane sister's threats, helpless no doubt, but leaving their tiger marks on the drapery of dreams, especially when dampness and dark affect one with fever, and the shadow of retribution on the back wall with ridiculous legal innuendos. All this was mere scenery, easily packed, labeled hell, and freighted away. And only very infrequently some reminder would come, say in the trick work close-up of 2 left hands belonging to different sexes. Doing what? Marina could no longer recall, though only 4 years had elapsed. Playing acquatements? No, neither took piano lessons. Casting bunny shadows on a wall? Closer, warmer, but still wrong. Measuring something. But what? Climbing a tree? The polished trunk of a tree. But where? When? Some day, she mused, one's past must be put in order, retouched, retaken. Certain wipes and inserts will have to be made in the picture. Certain telltale abrasions in the emulsion will have to be corrected. Dissolves in the sequence, discreetly combined with the trimming out of unwanted, embarrassing footage, and definite guarantees obtained. Yes, someday before death with its clapstick closes the scene.